The thing is WTF. I'm saying that, you know what that stands for. I'm saying that kindly. What the F happened in 1971? Probably the last currency standing is going to be the U.S. note. And they tell us it's all about freedom and liberty, but really what it's about is defending this world reserve currency, a currency backed by nothing but confidence, and the confidence is the big war machine behind it. So this is how our game gets played.
You see, we're on a mission. We're on a mission. You see, a mission from God.
So we've got this central bank bond game going on, and it's literally like a game of musical chairs. As one country gets in trouble, nobody wants to hold their bond anymore. So we're counting down the countries, and they're starting to knock off as we speak. We know that Turkey has been in trouble. We know that Lebanon is in a lot of trouble. We know that Sri Lanka has just gone bankrupt. So don't be saying this couldn't happen in your fair land, because it certainly can, and it's on its way. Probably the last currency standing is going to be the U.S. note, but all of our currencies, if you're Canadian, the Canadian dollar is pegged to the U.S. dollar, and that happened way back in Bretton Woods. But something in 1971 took place. And the thing is WTF. I'm saying that, you know what that stands for. I'm saying that kindly. What the F happened in 1971? Well, Richard Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard. It used to be that a dollar currency was backed by gold, but once that happened in 1971, basically they just said no. The dollar is free floating. It's essentially a confidence game. And just the dollar's just worth that because we say it is by decree, and that's the word fiat. So how does a country make sure that we all still believe in the value of that dollar? Well, they have gigantic war machine. They go around the world and they tell us it's all about freedom and liberty, but really what it's about is defending this world reserve currency, a currency backed by nothing but confidence, and the confidence is the big war machine behind it. So this is how our game gets played. So anyway, I get off on these tangents, but let's get back to inflation. So we know that as inflation rises, we also have another problem, and that's economic activity. This is usually looked at through employment. If employment starts to stagnate and we've got high inflation, they call it stagflation. And that happened in the early 70s. It was from about 73 to 78 or 79, stagflation was huge. The only way that they got us, and collectively the world economic system, the only way they got it out of this turmoil was to allow interest rates to rise freely. That was the Secretary Paul Volcker. I'll put down here on the notes what he was. Anyways, he was some dude. Paul Volcker let interest rates rise. They went up to about 18%. We couldn't do that today. There's just no possible way. Countries would collapse. Businesses would collapse. We would be not just in recession, we would be in a Great Depression. But as we speak today, our economic activity from a tailing end, see, anytime they look at these numbers, they're always looking backwards. They're looking in the rear view mirror. They're not telling us what's going to happen. They're telling us what has happened. Well, I can tell you right now that there are countries that believe they're already in recession. Recession meaning we're slowing down in our economic activity. So if they're going to rise interest rates, as we talked about, that's meant to slow activity, to bring that inflation rate back to 2%. But inflation is currently at 8.5%. So what are we going to do? Print more money? If we print more money, that's going to cause inflation to go up. So you see, they've got themselves into this room with the too small rug, and they can't pull it into a corner without it coming out in another part, and that's exactly what's going on. Not to mention all the signals in our market are gone. Markets are supposed to tell us things. We're supposed to know that when we create a product or service and nobody's buying it for that price, that gives us a signal. Okay, well, we better find a way to make the price lower. So we have to become more efficient. We have to create new technology, or we have to do something differently, be more efficient. Of course, the obvious thing that we do today is basically just reduce people's wages. Let's cut their wages in half. But no, now comes the government and says you can't do that. They're essentially putting price controls into our system, saying there needs to be a minimum wage and it has to be this much. Well, that's fine. So the entrepreneur, or the person running a small restaurant, that says, if I got to pay these people now $15 an hour, I can't afford to hire three people. I can only hire 2 people. There goes a job. And so this again starts that downward spiral. So we don't have signals in the market now. We can't tell what's going on because interest rates aren't moving up and down like they're supposed to. The monetary flooding of money has gone out there, so we don't know what's worth what. We could really get off on a whole thing here, but in the stock market, there's a whole bunch of companies that are referred to as zombie corporations. They are virtually dead, but because of money printing, they can borrow it at such a good rate that it makes it look like they actually have a viable industry, but they're not producing a thing. They're essentially a dead business, but they look good on the stock market. They look good in your pension fund. So you see how our game in this clown car is continuing to roll down the road? It's getting worse and worse. And I'm not being a doomsayer. I'm just explaining, what are you going to do? How are they going to change this? The mechanisms that the Keynesian economic system put in place, they're all starting to fail. So if we in the country of Canada take on a higher debt load, as an example, that means that every household in the country has to take on that same debt load. Right now, and I'm using Canada as an example because that's where we lived. We no longer live in Canada for obvious reasons, but Canada, on average, a Canadian has a debt load of $1.83 for every $1 that they earn. That's 183% over their earnings. So if you did run a business and you brought in $1 but you owed $1.83, how long do you think your doors would stay open? But no, our government's going to tell us that we can keep this menagerie ongoing and its prosperity because they get us to look at things like that bubble, that balloon I was telling you about, which is our house. Look at your house. You're wealthy. You got money. Well, that's great. Maybe as you're borrowing against your house, but now that 183% starts to go up, doesn't it? So the more we borrow, we're really just giving the banks our wealth. See, it used to be that we saved money. We used to be able to save money and talk to your parents or grandparents or maybe great-grandparents. They may not be alive, but ask your relatives about this. Way back when, people that came out of the Depression and the First or Second World War, they knew what saving was all about. You didn't buy something until you had the money for it. But we were told after the 70s, WTF, 1971, after the 70s we could have it now. Why wait for it? You can buy it on credit. And this has become so much a part of our economic activity that, as a matter of fact, we take a look and we go, gee, I want to buy that widget or that asset, but if I don't buy it now, it's going to only be worth more or cost more. And this is how people rush into the housing market, right? So if I don't buy it now, the price is going to go up, it's going to cost more. So rather than saving, they spend every penny they can and they get into the real estate market or they buy the things. So we're taught to consume as quickly as we earn that $1, and that's why we're in the position of $1.83 in debt at large. So we have no savings anymore. So we have no savings. How are we preserving our wealth? We're preserving it in supposed assets that are owned effectively by a government. If you think you own your property, just go take a look at your deed, and you'll realize very quickly that you pay a mortgage on it, but they can snap it from you in a second. Try not paying your taxes for a few years and see how that goes. You'll find out who really owns your property. So, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Who's responsible? People ask that question. Well, it's the government that we elect. The white-collared, neatly tied individuals that we put in office to provide us a good quality of life. Well, it's interesting if you look at it. Somebody goes into office for a couple of terms and they come out multimillionaires. They're not earning that much money. So boy, they must know something about investment that we don't know. They must have some fund that they have access to that we don't have. So you see how the rules of the games change? They become part of that Cantillon effect. So this is why people go into politics, and I am generalizing. There might be the odd good one here and there, but mostly they're self-serving and they're doing things for themselves. They really don't care about us. They're not looking out for the population and the greater good. What they're doing is they're grabbing everything they possibly can as this thing is spiraling out of control. They don't care if they saddle you with debt or they saddle your grandkids or your great-grandkids with debt. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're in there for 8, 12 years. Off they go. And they probably are investing outside of their country as well. That's because they can get their money out. But it's frustrating because this is criminal activity. Nobody else could do this. Nobody else could get away with this. But because we call them elected officials, essentially they can rob us. And they do so through inflation. They're inflating away our assets. And when our assets that we truly believe are part of our wealth, maintaining our wealth, they're going to come after that as well. Because, remember, money is created out of debt. And in order to pay the interest rate on the national debt, the government needs to create more money. Now, they don't want to raise our taxes. That's too obvious. So they're going to look at confiscation, and they're going to call it a capital gain or unrecognized capital gain. Yeah, very soon your house will have a tax opposed to it, or no, it's confiscation. Frankly, it's money that they're just going to pull right off the right off your equity, because you made money on an inflating housing market that they created, and they can't tax you because that's too obvious and they'll get their asses turfed. So they're going to create a tax on the homeowners, and there's a whole lot of people that aren't homeowners anymore. Remember, as the interest rates are rising and it's getting more and more difficult for young families to afford a mortgage, they're leaving the housing market. So those people are going to be pissed off. Those that haven't been able to get in the housing market are already pissed off. So they're not going to care when the government says, yeah, we're going to impose an unrecognized capital gain tax on houses. They'll sell it as grabbing from the rich. Even though all you did was pay your mortgage. You did the right thing. You paid your mortgage, right? But no, they're going to come after that money. So this is how insidious a government and the criminality will be. They'll take the money and make sure that their friends in the banking industry get the money that they need, because those bonds and those interest rates have to be paid. Well, until we wake up and we decide that we're going to take this back, it's not going to change. But we're seeing this starting to happen around the world. This is why we see the riots. You won't necessarily see it on mainstream media, but you go digging a little bit, it's happening. You do know that there's the farmer thing in the Netherlands. What's behind that? What, farmers are pissed off because of something, because they can't get fertilizer? No, they're realizing that they are being inflated out of business. They can't pay for the fertilizer anymore because the cost has gone up 3 or 4 times. They can't pay for their equipment. They can't pay the money they need to plant the food or to raise the livestock. And what's going to happen when they can't afford that? Well, they're going to have to sell their land, aren't they? Who do you think's stepping up to buy their land? Do a little looking into that. You'll be surprised. These are the Cantillon zillionaires that are coming up to sweep in and take the land from you. Now, why would they want to take the land that grows our food? Let me see. Have we got a bunch of surplus population, a bunch of useless eaters? Let's say about 8 billion of them. Yeah. This is where it gets kind of creepy. They can't inflate much more. They can't tax. They can't confiscate. They will, but it's all becoming too self-evident. So they need less people, and this is what's starting to happen. So we've got to look at this inflation and what it's doing and how they ultimately will inflate away our wealth one way or another. If we cashed out our house today, let's say we sold our house, we took all the money from our house and we put it into a bank, and we got interest on that, but we got 3%, because that's roughly all you can make today. We got 3% interest, but inflation is at 8.5% to 12% a month or a year. All right, you're underwater. How many years is it going to take before that amount of money is essentially gone? You know, it's a sad statement, but what if you live longer than your money? Nobody wants to think about that. So it's better to bury our head in the sand and think this isn't happening and believe in our government, right? The things that are in place today, if you're in Canada, you can check it out. It's I don't know the bill. I can figure out exactly what it was, but it went through Parliament. It is now legal for a bank to bail in, not bail out, as they did at the last financial crisis. The government gave banks money. In this case, the bank is going to go into your account and my account, and they're going to take money. That's called a bail-in, and it's perfectly legal. When you put your money in the bank, it isn't your money anymore. You've given it to the bank on loan, and they can bail that in. We talked about the unrecognized capital gains. They're going to claw that back off of us quickly. Essentially, that's confiscation. And speaking of confiscation, maybe you decide to hold precious metals. You go, okay, you know what, I've done my research, I'm going into gold, silver, platinum, and I'm going to put it in a safe, I'm going to keep it in my house. Well, that's a great idea until the government comes along and says, you can't hold that anymore, and we need it all, and you must turn it in by this date. Now, that was also done by FDR, and he confiscated gold in May of 1933. It was against the law in the United States to hold gold after that. Now, some people might have, but if you were found with it, you went to jail. Simple as that. So confiscation is a real possibility. And if you think you might be able to get away with it by crossing the border and moving out of the country, good luck, right? They've got machinery that's going to sense you got gold in your suitcase or something like that. You can't get it out of the country. And what are you going to do? How are you going to move to take your house? You're going to pick your house up off the ground and move it to another place? You can't do that. So liquidating your house is going to be a problem. They're going to come along and they're going to tax us on what they're calling the carbon tax, because it's global warming, you know. And even though it's if you're in Canada this summer, depending on where you are, some people are saying it's been the coolest summer in years. But apparently the planet's overheating. So carbon tax, that's something that they're going to come in and start plucking from your assets. There's also mobility taxes as you move a vehicle around. The clicker that's automatically built into the chip in your car is going to detect how far and where you've driven. You'll pay accordingly, and it'll just be siphoned out of your bank account. You'll also pay an energy premium tax. The more energy you use, you'll be paying a premium. So these are the things that you can look forward to as the government needs to find new and inventive ways to get your money. Now, up until this point, we've had cash, and I guess the thing was ultimately you could put cash under the mattress, and you could pay for things with cash and kind of do it as they called under the table. But that is quickly being removed from the option for you, and that'll be done with a CBDC. Now, we did that in another series. We talked about that in another one of these episodes. So take a look at that if you want to find out a bit about CBDCs and why they are, well, just not good. All right. But the CBDC will ensure that any of your wealth, they know exactly where it is at all given times. As you move across a border, you won't be able to take the money in your bank account and transfer it to another bank account because they have a line on it. They know exactly what's going on. They know your mobility. They will literally have your identity attached to anything when you move across the border. I think they call that a rein can. That's going to get tied into your driver's license, your passport, and ultimately your Vax Pass. So this is how they'll be able to control all of that. And finally, the last element is to come after your bank account. That's your money, the CBDC. So it's all going to be done like that. And that'll give them an opportunity to confiscate, and you can't do anything about it. And maybe you can try to go to court, but too late. They've already shut you off. You don't make your mortgage payment, the bank forecloses, they take your property. I know I'm spelling the worst case scenario, but this is the kind of stuff that unfortunately is going to happen. Now, maybe you think you buy a rare car. That's an idea, a collectible car or a boat or something like that. But now we got that mobility tax again, and as you move that asset from A to B, you're going to get taxed anyways out of your CBDC. So you see where this is going, right? If we allow the government and the central banks to control all of these elements and all of these parts of our lives, we're basically giving in to being slaves, are we not? We might be living in a nice prison, but we in fact are slaves. So we have a challenge, and I would like to challenge you right now, because we can do something about it. Do we stand by as we watch somebody getting robbed? Are you that type of person that when someone is getting their wallet taken or their purse taken, you stand by and you do nothing? You say, I don't want to get involved. You know what? That's just not for me. I'll call the police. Maybe they'll do something about it. That's their job. Well, there are those type of people, and they say that until it happens to them, and then they wonder why nobody does something when a mugger is coming up and whacking them over the head and taking their wallet. So you see, we can stand around and do nothing, or we can stand up and do something. It's the same way if you look the other way in a financial calamity, which is what we're in right now. Only in this case, the mugger is the government and the central bank. We're doing nothing about it. We're standing by and saying, hey, you know what? It doesn't really affect me. But meanwhile, the cop that's collecting your speeding ticket, the bylaw officer that's telling you your grass is too long, the clerk at the licensing office, they're all rent-seeking, they're all taking money, they're all just pulling your wealth away, and they'll continue to do that, only it'll become electronic and they won't even need those people. So even those guys are going to start losing their jobs. Just like I talked about earlier, it's all great until it happens to you, right? So maybe you say, hey, look, I've lived a good life. I've played by the rules. It's really too bad if that happens to other people and they get screwed. But that's their choice. Maybe they should have worked harder. Maybe they should have bought a house when they could have. Maybe they shouldn't have invested in that business and lost their savings because somebody came along and shut down their business from a pandemic and they couldn't reopen. They lost everything that they had worked for. Not too bad. You know what? That's just the way it goes. Now, one might argue that you have a point. The rules of the past 50 years, that's pretty much how they've gone. Keep your nose clean, pay your bills, you got a nice house, it's worth some money now, and you've done a good job, and that's the way life's going to be. Only those rules have changed. See, we've talked about a fiat currency, and You should look this up. It's worth it. A fiat currency rarely lasts longer than 40 or 50 years, and we are long past that now. We are in the life support years of the fiat currency that's running this world. So the rules for the next 50 years are about to change, and we've spelled out what those look like. The CBDC, the confiscation, the taxes, the money printing, the mobility costs, the energy costs. All of these are emerging for the next generation. These are your kids, these are your grandkids, and maybe your great-grandkids. Now, you lived a good life, but if you can stand by and watch them get mugged, because it's coming, I think you'd have to do a little bit of soul searching. So the question is that you? Are you the type that's going to sit by and say it's none of my business? Or are you going to do something? What can you do? Is there something you can do? Absolutely there is. You can say enough is enough. Why not take away the weapon from the mugger? Take away all their power, the ability to create money. Why not take a portion of your savings, your portfolio, your wealth, and put it into a cause for freedom? Now, this cause has no marketing campaign. You're not going to get a fridge magnet of a kid that you fed. You're not going to hear from some slick CEO about how you saved the pandas. No, this cause is organic. This cause is the lifeblood of all mankind. It's the control of monetary energy. That is our time, and that's our labor. And when one person wins, we all win. That's a cause we can get behind. See, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. There is no ability for one person to do better than another in Bitcoin. It's a network, and it benefits everybody equally, from the woman that's selling an empanada in Colombia to the mucky-muck Wall Street banker. Neither one benefits in a more significant way than the other as far as the network goes. It's equally the same. And frankly, it's also equally detrimental. So you'd be shooting yourself in the foot by trying to ruin the network to harm another person. So if we don't have that, we have no money printing, we have no interest rates, we have no war machine. If we don't need to protect a reserve currency, the industrial war complex, what's the point? This organic network doesn't need protecting. It looks after itself through proof of work. The Bitcoin that already exists is all there is. And it's getting more and more scarce as each 210,000 blocks goes by. Every 4 years approximately, less Bitcoin comes into existence. That's deflationary. We've never had anything like this before. This is a completely new paradigm in a monetary system. It's decentralized. That means the network is everywhere at the same time. It's secured through proof of work, which is energy, something that we can advance with technology, renewable. We don't have to use the energy that we know of from the last 100 years. We can find new ways of creating energy, and they are right now, and they're making it economically viable. So Bitcoin is actually bringing new energy online to self-sustain. It's remarkable. The government can't control it. The central banks, they don't want it to be here. They can't corner it. The industrial war complex, there's no need for them if there's Bitcoin. They don't have to defend the world reserve currency because this currency benefits everybody. It belongs to everyone. So there's nothing to defend. So when you begin to understand, you put all these pieces together and you realize that we've got to do something differently. You have a choice. You can choose Bitcoin. And when you do, you're choosing to change the world. Not just for people alive today, but for future generations as well. So it leaves one question to be asked. What are you waiting for?